Welcome to Music Forever, a podcast by the New Horizons International Music Association. I am Irene Cohen. This interview is with Tyrone and Joanne Paterson in London, Ontario, Canada, in May 2024. They are better known as Ty and Jo. Ty is one of Canada's leading opera conductors. He currently serves as Music Advisor and Principal Conductor for Manitoba Opera. He has appeared with most of Canada's professional companies and as guest conductor with numerous professional companies throughout the United States, Asia, and Europe. Ty held the position of Artistic Director and Principal Conductor for Opera Lyra Ottawa for 16 seasons, performing at the National Arts Centre. Ty is also an experienced educator, having led student productions at Western University, the University of Calgary, and the University of British Columbia. Early in his career, Ty served as music director for the Calgary Youth Orchestra. He made his professional conducting debut with the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra at the age of 25. Looking ahead to retirement, Ty is focusing on jazz and is learning to play trombone in the New Horizons band, together with his wife, Jo. He has recently launched a new jazz combo called Second Act Combo, and he's playing the keyboard. Jo Paterson is a research and scholarly communications librarian at Western Libraries of Western University in London, Ontario. She currently specializes in scholarly publishing and digital scholarship. She draws on her background in musicology and the humanities to support digital projects. Jo holds degrees in music history and literature, general humanities, and musicology with a special interest in genealogy. Jo plays trumpet and euphonium in the New Horizons band at Western University in London, Ontario. Like her husband Ty, she plays in many community swing and jazz bands in the city. Thank you so much for doing this interview today.
You're welcome.
We're sitting here at the kitchen table at my home. We all play in the same New Horizons band at Western University. And as a matter of fact, Jo and I and Ty also play in various jazz bands in the city. So we see each other almost every night.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. As usual, the first question for this podcast is how did you get in music?
So I would say that we both came from very musical households. So my parents thought music literacy was an important part in being a human. They were both musical. And so when I was 4 or 5, I started piano lessons. And I think the same for Ty.
The same with me. Started very young with piano lessons. My father was an organist at the church. He even taught music for a couple of years in the school system. And then as part of the church, I sang in the boys' choir. Later, I was conducting the boys' choir, and they all seem like little angels when they're singing, but the reality is a little bit different behind the scenes.
I would imagine. How old were you when you started to conduct?
You know, that's a bit of a complicated question because I made my professional conducting debut, conducted at Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra when I was 26. But I had been conducting already various choirs and bands and various groups. When I went to university, I was studying to become a music teacher. So, of course, we learned all of the instruments and learning how to conduct and basic courses and that sort of thing. And then it kind of built from there. I became involved with the opera company as a singer, and it kind of built from there. So I guess my answer to that question would be around 20, but as a professional conductor when I was 26.
All right. Okay. And we'll get back to that whole career of yours a little bit later on. Both of you started playing the piano.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember what your parents were playing, Joanne?
My father sang in the church choir. He was also a member of the Clarkson Music Theater. So he sang roles in shows. So he was in High Button Shoes and he was in Guys and Dolls and that sort of thing. And my mom played piano at home. until she found that she couldn't see through her glasses very well. So she kind of stopped. My dad, he played trumpet with the cadets when he was a young boy. And then he led the cadets when he was a bit older. And this was during the Second World War, just after the Second World War. And they played in parades across the borders, and because they were in Niagara Falls, and they would go across the bridge and then back. He said it was miles and miles. But when in grade 8, I picked the trumpet. My dad and my sister played, and it's like, yeah, I like that. I want to be like them. So I'm picking the trumpet.
But I also played clarinet and sax when I was in high school and through university. I also played some drums, and back in the day, played in a country band at the Legion, and a polka band.
When I was in high school, I played in a number of instrumental groups, and then I wanted to play in the jazz band, and we had a couple of teachers, and they said, you must join the choir if you play in the jazz band.
Having such a rich musical childhood, you're sort of matter-of-factly talking about it. This is just what was done. And when you look at children today and what is available to them, what do you think?
I think it depends. I think there are some very strong programs still. I think every child should have an opportunity to be in music. And that's sad that it's not happening, because every child can make music. I mean, there's no excuse for not having a choir of some sort. You don't need any sort of instrument. You don't even need the piano or anything. So there's really no excuse for it.
Yeah, that's right. And it's integral, I think, to being a human, to make music.
And it brings people together, which is a big part of what New Horizons is about, is, being a group and the whole social aspect. That's very important for children, whether it be sports or music. Our son Benjamin, he's also extremely gifted musically and didn't go into music. He had a great sense of community through his water polo team. And it's fascinating to see it with New Horizons, with now the older generation, and how important making music together is to all these people coming from completely different backgrounds. And it doesn't matter what your career is or was.
It's a very equal playing field, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you're sort of playing at this level of music. So both of you completed your high school years and have been playing hither and thither, and then you chose for directions in your university years. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So took the thing that I was sort of good at. So I ended up in music, and I thought I would be a music teacher. So I did have a bit of music head, but then I got sucked into music history and literature, and then into musicology. So I found that the more I learn about something, the more I'm interested in it. So I just kind of went with that, not really having a vision of what work I might do afterwards. But I was like, I'm enjoying this. So that's what I did.
Well, the same thing. I was training to become a school teacher. In fact, I did it for a year as a substitute teacher. And a very strange story, because I was working with the opera company as well, in the sense of I started to sing in the opera chorus. And then I was singing in our school touring program with both Calgary and Edmonton operas. And we would take small versions or cut down versions of operas and take them to schools or the big cities like Cold Lake or in Slave Lake. And we would do these shows. So the opera company got to know me that way. The second boss in the Calgary Opera came to a show at the University of Calgary that was a double bill. And so 2 one-act operas. I was singing in one and I was conducting the other one. And so it's like, oh, well, would you be interested in doing some backstage conducting and such with the opera? And so that's how I started to get involved, was to start conducting backstage groups and etc. The supervisor of music for the Calgary School Board at the time was really wonderful. And I remember they offered me a full-time job as a school teacher in the same week that Calgary Opera offered me a full-time job. And I talked to her about it. I said, I'm a little concerned about this. I'd like to take this opportunity with the opera, but I don't want to miss out, here. She said, well, we like what you're doing, and I think you should take the opera job. And if it doesn't work out, we'll still have a job for you in a year. So that gave me the courage to take the job at the opera company. And then things grew from there. But I thought that was really a wonderful attitude of hers. Yeah, it gave me the courage to to try that.
A big choice at a
Yes, it
young
was.
age,
It was. Yeah.
with, of course, job security being important.
Exactly. Both of my parents were teachers, so I knew, what how pension and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
I really liked playing jazz, and I was in one of the jazz bands, and it turns out this guy was playing bari sax in the jazz band. He always says that he got the prettiest girl in the band.
I did. She was the only girl in the band.
The competition must have been fierce.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And you have to understand, so she grew up in Mississauga, but her dad was working for Shell Oil at the time, and they moved the head offices from Toronto to Calgary. And so Jo came to Calgary when she was in grade 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
this wonderful man approached you who plays baritone sax. Like, you started to go out, and then where did your life take you from there?
Our first date was an opera.
Oh, it was.
An opera ball. So that was kind of impressive.
Once a year, they had a very fancy dinner and dance. And yeah, that was our first date.
Ty sucked me and he said, "Oh, you're going to be a supernumerary."
Yeah.
So a supernumerary is someone who doesn't sing, but you just sort of fill the stage and you're in costume and you might have to, he said, you just have to stand there. First opera, Carmen, they give all these people roles. You are going to be the orange seller. Okay. So here I am saying, you're going to be on stage by yourself, 2 soldiers. They're going to steal your oranges. You have to get them back. So that was fun. And then I was in a couple of other ones where I got to wear a big, mantilla and a huge dress and wigs. And that was kind of fun. But it's true. You just kind of stand there and follow people around. And I danced the minuet in ballo and mascara and masked ball. And it was a raked stage. And we had a lovely French-Canadian choreographer. He was from the ballet company. What he wanted for the chorus to come down in 3 sections down this raked stage. And so he's like, okay, here we have the première line, deuxième line, third line. I'm really glad I'm not in the third line. I was in the première line. Merci, Jean.
Obviously, your career took off quickly. You then had to start moving around, I imagine, like any professional musician.
It's a difficult life in many ways. Normally, you have to work in a variety of different places, different cities, different countries. I was working with Calgary Opera for a few years as I was starting. Then I started to do quite a bit of guest conducting with other companies. Then Joanne got an opportunity to have some jobs in Vancouver. I did a few shows for Vancouver Opera as well. One of the shows I was conducting there was for Barbara Seville. The soprano, Tracy Dahl, phenomenal soprano, was sick one day. And I was out walking around on the seawall. And those days I didn't have a cell phone or anything like that. And then I showed up and I thought, that doesn't sound like Tracy. I heard them warming up, before the show. I'm like, who's that? And it turned out it was Judith Force. And I said, Judith Force? Well, so, and I said, oh, Tracy's sick, so Judith is going on tonight. Of course, she's a mezzo, so she sings her arias and duet and such in different keys. So the orchestra had to play in different keys and different tempos, everything. But it was really exciting evening. And Tracy was amazing too, but there was just this energy in the house because we didn't know what was going to happen. And Judith Force, of course, is a great singer, but and everything was different. But I just remember that as being a really exciting performance.
Yeah. Right. Being at a New Horizons level, when you say, well, the orchestra just had to play in a different key, I get goosebumps even. I don't even know where to begin with that, because we are, of course, at a very different level as amateurs in a New Horizons band. Tell us a little bit about the challenges of having a career as a maestro, traveling around the world.
Oh, well, there definitely are challenges. Everybody's journey is a little bit different. For me, I in many ways, I was extremely fortunate. On the other hand, it kept me from doing some things too. One of the big personalities in the Canadian opera world, certainly in the Western Canadian opera world, was Irving Gutman. And he started quite a few of the Western opera companies and was a stage director. And he at first told me, well, you have to go to Germany if you want to be a conductor. You can't just stay in Canada. That's what a lot of people will do. And they still do that. And then they get an opportunity to grow there. I've been conducted in Germany, but years later as a guest, as opposed to going in and being on staff. But as it turned out, I was able to, most of my career has been in Canada, and I've conducted with almost all of the companies except for the Canadian Opera company in Toronto. Usually you do have to go somewhere else. And Irving Gutman, who at the time told me, no, you have to go away, he became my biggest mentor, as it turned out. And he just saw something in me and created opportunities for me, and really ended up helping me a lot.
And where did you end up with your career, Joe?
I was not the personality to be a musician. I knew that, but I thought I could help music and the arts flourish. So I looked into becoming a marketing person and fundraising. So I took some courses, and then I got that position in Vancouver. And so I worked for the Vancouver Recital Society, for the Green Thumb Theatre for Young People, the Arts Club Theatre. Our son came along, and what I found about working in the arts is that they want you to work very long hours for very little pay.
Yes.
And I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. Ty got an opportunity to work in Ottawa, Opera Lyra Ottawa, in the National Arts Centre. I stepped away from arts marketing and thought, I'm going to change careers. While I was a student at university, I worked in the music library all the time, and they always said, you'd be a great librarian, you should go get a library degree. And so that's what I did. We lived within walking distance of Algonquin College, and so I got the library technician diploma. I worked at the National Library as a music cataloger. Finally, I found an online program I could take, and I became a professional librarian while I was working at my master's in information science, and then became a librarian.
So you were able to do all this.
Yes, amazing. As a single mom most of the time, because I was never home.
I worked full time, and I got a master's degree online.
Yeah.
Right. That is incredible.
It is incredible.
Your work isn't only having to travel, but it's also the nighttime and the weekend hours.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's 4 or 5, and the shows in Germany were 7 weeks I was away, and so
It does require a very special person
absolutely
to support somebody with that sort of a career. Definitely. And you did it. You did it.
right.
You can look back at it now, but you did it, and you managed to develop your own career.
Exactly. I want to go back to something she said. She didn't think she was a good enough musician to have followed through with that. That's the key, is right there. She didn't think she was good enough, and she absolutely was and is. It's a mind game.
The psychology of music. You think, I can't do this, I'm not good enough, and then you're not, because that's So
and she's a great musician. But when we were at university too, we played a jazz band together. But also she played in the pit for an opera that I conducted there. She's the principal trumpet for it. So
very impressive. Tell us how you ended up in London, Ontario. Of course, we feel very lucky because the two of you have really enriched not just the New Horizons band, but the other bands that I'm in as well. Ty, you are now playing trombone and started as a beginner in the New Horizons program, which seemed really odd. You think, well, this guy is conducting. He should be able to pick up a trombone and just play the darn thing. But
I had worked at Library and Archives Canada for many years, and I was sort of looking for a change, and the job came up at Western in the cataloging department of the library. And so I applied for it, and I got it. And it's like, uh-oh, now we have to move.
Yeah.
And so we did. And then a few years ago, I took my dad, trumpet player, to the Elgin Museum because I said there's some instruments there, some brass instruments there. And I've heard of Hank Meredith. Let's go see this, and they're performing, and let's go. And so we went, and so I had a conversation with Hank, and he said, what do you play? And I said, well, I used to play trumpet. It's been a long time. And he says, I want you in my band, and I want you to play cornet. I said, well, I don't have a cornet. Well, I have 6. I'll let you borrow one. So he brought a whole bunch to the first rehearsal and said, here you go. And so I played in the plumbing factory band with Hank, which was fun. And he said to me, I need a trombone player. Tell Ty he's going to learn the trombone. Here's a trombone. So I took this trombone home.
I said, what? And then Hank kept saying, well, come and play in this concert. no. So I started trying to learn how to play. They said, are you coming to play in the concert? No, I don't want to play trombone. And I said, well, I'll give you back my trombone. I said, I didn't ask for it in the first place, right? So I was like, gave it back. So, and Joe had said, why don't you learn how to play? Because in retirement, that's something we can do together. So I thought, I'll go to Music Aid. So I went to Music Aid, this store in town here. Those guys are great at Music Aid. And I said, do you have any cheap trombones? And they said, well, I've got this one on the wall. I'll sell it to you for $65. I said, okay. So I came home with a $65 trombone. And I started practicing it.
So COVID hit.
Yeah, COVID hit. That's right. That's why I was just doing COVID hit is when, I had time to do that. So I saw Henry after the concert. They went out,
Yes.
and I went and sat there and said, Henry, I got my own trombone now. He said, I'm going to come over and I'm going to teach you how to play. So he started coming over to the house and he showed me how to hold it and how to play it. And because he used to teach brass at the university and low brass too. And so that's how I got started into the trombone. What really interests me these days is playing jazz. It's not something that I've ever done. Well, I shouldn't say ever, but as a professional. And so the trombone has given me an opportunity to do that. And because of COVID, I've also been working on my jazz piano skills and learning how to improvise, which is something that I didn't know how to do either. And so I've really been working on that. And I'm going to be doing my first little jazz combo gig coming up in a couple of months. So get ready for it on piano.
It's impressive that you learned music young and you've clearly made a decision. We're going to do this until the end of our life or for as long as we can. And we keep learning new things.
And there's so much to learn. You can't know everything. It's impossible. And this is how I think it's very important as a musician to realize that. And we learn from each other. So I'm learning things from not only the conductors of the groups, but also people I'm sitting beside.
And speaking of playing as long as you can, so I'm in the New Horizons, as is my father.
Yeah.
My father's in New Horizons, but my dad is 91.
What a sweet story.
Yeah.
We also play in the Shrine Trumpet Band together.
Because our son also plays in the band, the trumpet band.
Yeah.
3 generations of trumpets.
I have to say that I love both of your playing, your solos. There is obviously so much musicianship behind it. And I learn a lot from you, particularly, don't worry playing a solo. Just do it. I will listen to your solos and I go like, I'm pretty sure they're probably right now thinking that was not the note that was intended to come out of the horn.
That's for sure.
But then you just keep playing. And so it's already forgotten by the time the next note arrives. And that is something you have to learn when you're not used to playing solo. So thank you for that. You mentioned earlier that New Horizons is special.
Yeah.
And maybe share a little bit what you mean by that.
Some people maybe are learning for the first time to play an instrument, or it's been 40 years since they're in high school or whatever, and they're picking the instrument up again, or it's a new instrument. It's just having that opportunity to actually learn new things. So it's even as a professional musician, it's New Horizons for me as well, giving me an opportunity. And then on top of that, it's the whole community aspect. The people are great. There are so many.
Very welcoming community.
Very welcoming.
And like you say, I'm not afraid to make mistakes. It's like, whoops. And of course, I used to be petrified.
And it's not the same as if it's a professional world. Well, okay, if you can't do it, you're out. All of these groups are extremely accomplished people have had amazing careers in medical field and et cetera, and so accepting.
Mm-hmm. And there are cookies and coffee.
Yes, there are indeed. Yeah,
you don't see that in any of the other sort of bands. So that is a wonderful plus. And our New Horizons band here in London does something very special, and that is going on trips to Europe every 2 years.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to share where you're going this year?
Sure, we're going to Belgium and France.
Belgium and France.
Cheers. Yeah, and for us, we've never been.
That's perfect because it's our 35th wedding anniversary, and we're going to Paris.
I joined New Horizons and then went on a trip to Ireland just before COVID, so 2019. I had a blast. I had such a good time. It was so much fun playing out in these great venues, old churches, Bandshells.
It is. It's a special experience. We play music. We don't sell tickets. We sit in any space that welcomes us. And then there is a crowd. And I have found that crowds in Europe are very grateful. And you really bond with people in your band that you're traveling with.
It's a sad state of affairs that in Canada, most of the cities, I won't say all the cities, but most of the cities, there just are not the concerts in the summer in the park that there used to be. There are so many restrictions. I know a lot of the conductors of these groups that we're playing in, they've contacted the city, and there are all these restrictions and licenses and costs and etc. That's here we are. We have some wonderful Bandshells, wonderful parks, and you can't play in them.
If you would have to tell somebody who comes up to you and says, I saw you play a trumpet or the trombone, and I did that too in high school, or I've never actually played. It scares me to death. I think I'm too old now to learn. What would you tell them?
Never too old. Just do it. That's it. That's it. That's
it. Show up. And find something like New Horizons, because it's a very welcoming community. You learn a ton. You can go make mistakes. Nobody cares.
Some of these people have played since they were children and haven't stopped. And they may be, quote, unquote, amateur musicians, but some of them are really fine players. Mm-hmm. And then you have the other side where people are just learning. Yeah, you learn from each other. Yeah. That's how it works.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for giving this interview. Have a wonderful time in Europe, and keep playing.
Yes, we will. Whether you want us to or not.
I would like to thank Joe and Tys Paterson for this interview. If you would like to find out more about the New Horizons band in London, Ontario, Canada, please go to music.uwo.ca and click on the New Horizons Band tab. Music for this podcast by Mary Riddle. Swag on. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Music Forever. If you are interested to be interviewed for this podcast, please email us at nimapodcast@gmail.com. That is NHIMA podcast@gmail.com. See you next time.